Your mental and physical health is a part of your well being and should always be managed well. So let's take a quick self check. Who here could use a few more tips on maintaining a healthy lifestyle, especially when it comes to physical and mental health? Well, if that's you, stay tuned because we have plenty of tips coming your way. Hi, this is Naomi with the Planners on Purpose podcast. How is everyone doing today? If this is your first time here, I want to give you a first time welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. And if you've been here before, glad to have you back again. Today we have another featured guest on the podcast. Her name is Jillian Lama, and I am excited for you to meet her. Before I give you more information, though, I just wanted to jump into a few updates. The first update that you should know is the Stress Less Plan at Your Best course is now enrolling. If you're struggling with being consistently overwhelmed and are experiencing burnout with no way out, then this may be the course for you. Go to plannersonpurpose.com to find more. And I have a free masterclass that's happening this Wednesday and Thursday and will help you identify 5 mistakes event planners make that prevent them from living a life of purpose. If you want to hear all about those 5 mistakes and learn more about this course that I previously mentioned, then you should show up to this masterclass. I'll leave links to everything in the show notes. Now, finally, our guest today is Jillian Lama. I'm really looking forward to you hearing our conversation. Jillian is a certified life and weight loss coach and is the creator of the Body You Crave Method. She teaches high caliber women how to end emotional eating, lose excess weight, and feel amazing in their bodies, no cheating required. Now, I asked Jillian on the podcast because I found her to be delightful to speak with, and I really feel she has some gems to share with you about the importance of fitness and mental health in our industry. Without any more delay, please enjoy this interview with myself and Jillian Lama. Great. Well, welcome to Planners on Purpose. And today we have a very special guest here, Jillian Lama. Jillian, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, Naomi.
Yes, I'm very excited to have you here. I know we had a conversation before this, and I'm really just excited to bring to light health, emotional eating, and nutrition. I told the listeners a little bit about you, but I would love for you to let everyone know who you are and how you became to be a health coach.
Yeah, so I am, like you said, I'm Jillian Lama. I'm a certified life and weight loss coach. And so I help women specifically around emotional eating, cravings and urges, and self love, and creating more love and compassion in their life, because a lot of times that's missing from our weight loss process and journey, and often from a lot of areas of our life. So this venture and journey really started back in 2010 when I launched my first business, which was a cake and cupcake business in Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Oh,
And
wow.
most people are really, really shocked to hear that. Like, that seems kind of odd, for, a recent college grad, 24 years old, was actually in the process of getting divorced. And I didn't really have many options at the time. And so my parents were stationed overseas with the Foreign Service, and I just
Wow.
felt like that was where I needed to be. And I didn't quite understand why. My original intent was to work in the embassy, to have a real job, something corporate, something that paid the bills, could pay off my student loans. And what I found was, actually, once I got into the country and maxed out my credit card to get there was a hiring freeze. And
Oh,
so
no.
I had a place to live, I could live with my parents, but I felt really purposeless and just kind of really questioning, why, God, why? I thought you wanted me here, and now there's no job. But after a couple of months, and at the prompting of my dad, actually, I started a bakery, and it turned into cakes and cupcakes and doing custom creations and designs. So I did everything from castles to Barbie dresses to do
Cute.
mummies and pyramids, and it was so much fun. And I
I
learned a
think that would be
lot. But
great therapy for you too, you
I,
know?
yeah, that was really that was my like jaunt into entrepreneurship was with that bakery. I was like, oh my goodness, this was fun. I got paid to do something that I loved, and I could set my own hours. I could work my own schedule. I often worked weekends and would take like Tuesday, Wednesday off in the middle of the week. And that's really what kind of got me interested in having my own business. And so coming back to the States in 2012, like I am no ace of cakes. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I'd love to have my own business, but I also recognize that that's not it.
Mhm.
And so I did a variety of other work. I was a nanny, a personal assistant. I worked in PR, marketing, and I started to get into social media and business and marketing coaching. And then that evolved into wanting to become a health coach myself. And so I've always been into health, fitness, nutrition, and I had a lot of health coaches that I worked with, and I would help them market and promote and sell their offers. And there were some people who were really spot on, knew what they were doing, had really great work. And there were other people who were just spewing a bunch of crap. And I just could not get on board with promoting the diets that they were suggesting, or the detoxes or cleanses, or saying, this is all you have to do and this will fix all the problems. It was just a very it just didn't feel in line with what I wanted. And so I started
That's
to recognize,
perfect.
this is not for me. And actually, I want to be in that position where I can speak light and truth into a market that is filled with so much misinformation. And I think people really with good intentions, but at the end of the day, like not helpful. So that's kind of been my journey. It's been a lot of little stepping stones, and a lot of evolutions and developments. But it's been an amazing journey.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it sounds like you've lived in many different places along the way. So where's your favorite place? What is your favorite place to live?
Oh, yeah. So I would say, let's see. Monterey, California was probably my favorite place, living, like a block from the beach. We lived just north of Monterey. And that was such a beautiful area to be in. That's when I really started doing more distance running. And so to be able to run along the beach or the bike paths, to do they have different half marathons in that area. So I really had a blast there. I lived in Moscow, Russia, and Tbilisi, Georgia, in addition to Dhaka, Bangladesh, that were all overseas.
Mhm.
And those I liked for the travel opportunities. The cities themselves were not always, wonderful from my perspective,
Mhm.
but the travel that we got to do because of that was amazing.
That's amazing. And it's always nice to be in a place where you get the benefit of the weather most
Mhm.
of the time. So you can do those things like marathons.
Right.
And yeah, so that's probably why you really enjoy Monterey.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So this podcast, and I'm sure you know, it's all about empowering event planners to live amazing lives. We have very stressful jobs, and we like to be able to do that by learning a bit more about ourselves and becoming more purposeful and living our lives with intention. And sometimes that comes with lots of dramatic ups and downs that we have to, I guess, make consistent or navigate through.
Mhm.
So I would love to jump into this concept of stress eating. As you mentioned, you're an expert in that. How is the best way that planners can manage eating while they're stressed?
Yes. So this comes up in so many industries, but I'm so glad we get to talk about it here for event
Mhm.
planners whose main jobs are to take on the stress of their clients and to take on all of the problems and all of the, mistakes or things that happen or come up, whether they're in their control or not, and fix them. And so this is, one industry that I think is so impacted by stress eating or emotional eating, or sometimes stress drinking. And
Yeah.
so emotional eating is any time we are seeking a state change through food. So it could be that you're reaching for food or you're reaching for a glass of wine because you want to feel better. So you're in a negative emotion right now. So for example, stress, anxiety, fear, worry, and
Mhm.
you want to feel confidence, joy, relaxation, comfort, anything like that. So whether you're on the job or off, It's
Mhm.
any time that you are trying to avoid a negative emotion and your brain has simply just made the connection that food or alcohol is simply the most rapid and reliable and effective means of creating that sense of relief, creating that emotion or new state that you're seeking. And so we just have to, number one, give ourselves some compassion and grace and recognize, this is just what my brain has learned. I've created this habit, I've created this pattern, but the beauty of that is also that I also get to change that. And it's not as difficult as we often think. And so I teach something called the think, feel, act cycle. So we have circumstances in our life, and a lot of them are out of our control. We can't control traffic, what somebody else says to us. There's a lot of things, a caterer maybe quitting at the last minute. There are certain things that we can't control. What we can control is how we respond and how we show up. And so we have thoughts about that circumstance, and the thoughts are what ultimately drives the feeling. So if I'm feeling stressed, it's not because my caterer backed out last minute, it's because my thoughts about the caterer backing out. So it would be something like, oh no, I'm going to get fired, or they're going to hate me, or, I'm going to lose my job. That's the thought of like, this event is ruined. We have all of these mixed emotions and thoughts. And a lot of it, as an event planner, is going to fall back on you because you're the one running the show. And so you take on the weight. So not only is it maybe this event is ruined, it's now I've ruined this event and this is terrible. And so we just have to start to recognize where the stress really comes from, because so much is really out of your control. There are things that you can plan for. You can have contingencies and backup plans. But at the end of the day, there are going to be things that are just going to happen. For example, COVID, like nobody
Nobody
can
saw that
control
coming.
that. Yeah. And it's something that, we're going to have to learn to live with and work around. But it's going to be really looking at our thoughts and recognizing that the thoughts are what's creating the stress. And then because we've just been in this habit and this loop, because of the stress, we then tend to reach for food. And maybe it's a snack, maybe it's chocolate, maybe it's wine. It could be any number of things, but often we kind of have our go-to food that helps us to calm down or to relax or to feel like we have it together. And that is the biggest piece, is starting to recognize all of the thoughts that go on in our head, because so often it seems very subconscious. You might even think like, she's crazy, I don't have any thoughts, like this event is, or this thing is what's making me stressed out. And so we just have to kind of slow down and recognize, what we're thinking about that situation. And then also remind ourselves, like, we are very strong, capable, independent women. Like, you have got this. You are likely in this role because you are a very creative problem solver. You're resourceful and you can figure things out. And so it's not about things needing to be perfect. It's about how can I handle the imperfections when they come up, and recognizing and setting my expectation that inevitably something will go wrong, whether it's seemingly big or small. And it's always going to be how I handle that that's going to define how the event goes and how happy and satisfied my client is.
Yes, I mean, that's so great. And I love that. So if anybody hasn't written that down, the method, the think, feel, act method that Jillian brought up is so true with having to be able to navigate those situations. And I love the way you said, you know what you're doing as an event planner. You wouldn't be doing it if you were not, gifted in administration. So slowing down and separating yourself and your personal being from the situation really just helps us all just be able to deal with that particular situation isolated, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me about your own journey. I know you told us a little bit about how you got to be a health coach, but tell us a little about your personal journey with health and nutrition.
Yeah. So, it's really interesting. I grew up, and from a very young age, I thought I was overweight. So from like 8, 9, 10 years old, I thought, well, maybe I was fat. And it was small little comments from family members, and they didn't mean anything rude by it. Nobody ever, not that I'm aware of, I don't think anyone called me fat to my face,
Mhm.
but it would be little comments like my aunt saying, oh, be careful, Jilly, don't stretch out those shorts, when I was trying on my cousin's clothes. And me thinking, we're the same age, we're the same size. Like, I'm
Mhm.
no different than her. What are you talking about? Kind of feeling a little confused and starting to pick up and notice the thoughts and comments and things going on around my family, around my mom, my grandma, talk about their weight. And then starting to pick up on little cues. And when we had moved away, so we'd moved to Ohio, went back to visit family. And then my grandma saw that I had, grown a couple inches and I looked a bit skinnier. And she could not stop raving about how skinny I was. Oh my goodness, Jilly, you are so skinny. I can't believe it. And instead of feeling like proud or good about myself, what I made that mean as a 12-year-old was, well, I must have been fat before, and that was bad. Don't do that again. And so from a young age, and then you've got peer pressure, you've got magazines, you've got TV, right? We have all these other social influences.
Mhm.
And so from a young age, I learned that it was bad to be fat, to be overweight. You wanted to look a certain size. You wanted to look like the magazine covers. And so for me, it really was kind of a very up and down roller coaster ride. And I attached a lot of my self-worth and value to my body and how thin I was or how athletic I was. And so my weight went up and down throughout high school, but in college, I really struggled. I'd say freshman through junior year, I really, really struggled to like my body, to lose weight. I kept thinking I just need to run more and eat less. I signed up for a marathon in Russia. Like that's how much I thought, like, well, with this much running, I'm bound to lose weight. I didn't
Mhm.
drop a pound, like nothing because I kept eating. I was hungry. All the exercise only triggered my hunger alarm. And so I was constantly hungry. And because I kept trying to cut carbs or cut sugar or cut out, entire food groups, it then created massive cravings. And my body was just trying to compensate because of all the exercise and the restriction. And
Mhm.
so that was something that even once I learned how to solve to some extent after college, I still was terrified of gaining weight, of gaining it back, of living again in a body that I didn't like, of feeling, unpretty, not sexy, not attractive, all of these things because, there's so much worth and value that we often tie
Mhm.
with our bodies. And so it was definitely an evolution and a process of me really starting to recognize that I was at war with food and I was punishing myself with exercise in the gym. And I could tell people and kind of lie and be like, oh, I just love to run. Oh, I just love to eat healthy. But the reality was I was terrified that carbs were going to make me overweight. And then I would have this same struggle that I had previously. And
Mhm.
because I never learned how to love myself through the process of weight loss, it was always, well, once you get there, then you can be happy, then you can be confident, then you're, pretty.
Mhm.
I never really learned how to solve that. And so I just was terrified of gaining the weight back.
Mhm.
And that's something that came as I became a health coach. I started to recognize these patterns and these habits and things in my own life, as well as with clients, and started to see how I needed to get my own life together. I wanted to work on my own relationship with food and my body image, and exercise to
Mhm.
where I could then help other clients with that as well. So it's definitely been a journey where, it felt like a struggle for a very long time. But in the end, like as I look back now, I'm actually quite grateful for that experience because I know how to relate to other women. I can empathize so much with what they've gone through or what they're currently going through, because that was my story too. And
Yeah.
so just learning a better way, learning that it's not about the restriction, the deprivation, the willpower, and creating a really simple, sustainable process that can work for anybody. That's really what I'm about.
Absolutely. And like you said, everyone has their own unique journey, right, with health and
Mhm.
nutrition. And you mentioned just more of community. You highlighted that a little bit at the end. I feel like it's important to
Mhm.
have those affirmations, someone to affirm you, someone, your whole community to affirm you
Yes.
in your health, so you can approach it in a healthy way, versus in a destructive way, right? So
Right.
that's
Yep.
awesome.
Absolutely.
Right. So I want to switch gears and thank you so much for sharing your story. It just gives so much insight, and hopefully others will be able to hear a little bit more or apply it to their lives a bit more.
Mhm.
So, what is the silent killer that causes about 90% of all of our overeating?
Our thoughts. It's going to go back to our think, feel, act cycle. So
Yeah.
it's something that we don't often pay enough attention to. Some of us are aware that we have emotions, or we can maybe identify what emotions we're having. But the thoughts, we end up having roughly 50,000 different thoughts per day. And so there are so many that just run on autopilot and that are subconscious. And that's ultimately what drives this habit. So if we want to change how we show up, if we want to change our overeating habit or our emotional eating habit, if we want to end up creating new and different results, we have to first start by looking and identifying our thoughts. And this has to come from a place of compassion, no judgment, no shame, right? Really just curiosity and understanding, what am I thinking currently? Like, what's really driving this overeat? Because a lot of times it's excuses, justifications, and permission giving thoughts, which might sound like, it's free. I worked really hard today. I deserve it. Oh, I just want it. It's a 5-star, Michelin restaurant catering this event. Of course I want to eat some. I would be foolish not to. We have all of these thoughts around food and our eating, and we can often use that to justify what we're doing, only to beat ourselves up on the back end for it. And so really starting to identify and pinpoint what those thoughts are, it's going to help you to be more aware of them in the future going forward. So it's not that all of a sudden magically I know that, oh, I just, I use this excuse of, well, I just want it, or I worked out really hard. It's going to be, I recognize these thoughts and I'm still going to have that desire to eat, but now I'm just going to be eating or choosing to eat or not very consciously. So I'm going to be eating, I call it with my eyes wide open rather than eating behind my own back.
Mm, that's so good. And what do you think about the concept of groupthink, right? Because often, let's say we do these events within a group, we have a team, we're either excited that it went really well, or we're just, upset because things are going a little bit wrong, and we're heading out to the bar, or we're heading out to that restaurant. Can you talk about the groupthink concept and how you can steer yourself back from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this comes up often too, can come up around the holidays, when there's what I call, sometimes there are food pushers. There's people who, they want you to eat, they want you to drink, they want you to participate, and in part because that's how they're having fun, and they want to make sure you're having fun too. So a lot of times there's genuine goodwill in their desire for you to, come consume with them. Sometimes it's, well, I feel a little bit bad about ordering this next cocktail, so I'm going to want you to drink with me. That way I don't feel bad about myself. And so we want to be mindful, because we don't always know people's intentions, but it can come out for a number of reasons. And ultimately we have to recognize, like, they're just trying to protect themselves. They just want to have a good time, and so this is something where, again, we just want to be mindful about what we commit to. And so I teach my clients to create a 24-hour plan. And so you create a very realistic plan of foods that you actually like and enjoy. And if alcohol's on there, if appetizers are on there, that is 100% okay. We're going to plan very realistically for what you like to eat, and for having your own back for what are going to be the foods that are going to serve you and fuel your body. So if hey, this, like my group, we like to go out to a restaurant, we order appetizers, we have cocktails. You're just going to plan out ahead of time. Okay, here's the appetizer I plan on eating here, or I'm going to have a small plate of whatever appetizer the group wants, and I'm going to eat very mindfully. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to chew my food well. I'm going to participate and engage with others, and I'm not going to eat if I'm not truly hungry. You're also going to plan out, how many beverages are you going to drink? Are you going to have two or three cocktails, or a glass of wine, or something else? Really being mindful and setting that intention ahead of time can be very, very helpful. And so rather than relying on willpower in the moment to try and resist somebody encouraging you to eat or drink, you now already have a game plan of, well, this is what I committed to, this is what I said, and now it's self-love means sometimes I say no, but I do it from a place of having my best interest at mind, and without feeling deprived, because I'm still allowing myself to engage, to participate. And I'm recognizing that I can have fun, and I can socialize, and I can have, a good time with my colleagues without needing to consume food or without needing to drink. And so it's really just understanding the situation and planning ahead a bit, and recognizing that, no food is bad or off limits.
Mm-hmm. So good. That's just so good. And it's like taking the plans to the next level to make sure you're taking care of yourself right? Sometimes we take
Hmm.
good care of our clients. So
Right.
now take care of yourself, make those plans for yourself, and make sure that you're set up for success when
Yes.
you're eating, whether it's in a group, whether it's in personal. So that's so good. So good. Thank you. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about perfectionism, and I know you have a lot of thoughts here, but perfectionism, I've done a few episodes about it, and I feel like it's super important issue in our industry. We and sometimes that's led by the clients making sure that all the events are perfect, maybe us and our control trying to make sure our events are perfect, that nothing goes wrong. Um, Now there isn't any, there's not, making sure things go right is something that we definitely want to do, but perfectionism, I feel, can affect our overall health. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how perfectionism affects our health?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought this question up because so I consider myself a recovering perfectionist and it's something that I totally relate to. I'm sure a lot of a lot of your listeners do as well. And
Mhm.
so, so perfectionism, this is when we strive to create our self-worth and value based off of accomplishments.
Mhm.
So it becomes I can love myself, I can feel proud, I can feel confident because of X, Y, and Z, because I was perfect, because there was this flawless execution, because of what I have done, I now get to feel good, which means that if things aren't perfect, then I don't get to feel good about myself. So there's not as much self-love, or it could even be that there's a lot of shame, guilt, self-loathing that happens instead. And so I like to highlight that just so that we can start to understand and get to the root of that habit, because a lot of times that's really just ingrained in us as a kid. Simply what we learned, being 5, 6, 7 years old, we start to make conclusions with our little, young childlike brain of, this means that. If this, then this. When I score a goal, when I win the game, when I get straight A's, then I'm praised, then I'm loved, then I'm valued. And we start to put our worth and our value into the wrong thing. And so rather than, because there's doing things to a point of excellence,
Right.
right? Versus trying to be perfect and 100%. And so I think this also comes into play when managing expectations of clients and whomever you're working with, whether it's with a team, with a boss, with an individual client who's paying for the event. This is something where no bride ever wants to hear like, "Hey, there's going to be an issue at your wedding," right? And so there are tactful ways of setting these expectations and just reminding them like, "Hey, there will inevitably be something that may go wrong. That's okay. I've got you. Like, don't worry about it."
Mhm.
And trusting yourself as well in the process that mistakes are going to happen, that, there are going to be circumstances outside of your control. Like the weather is a huge one. If you were planning an outdoor event and all of a sudden there's like a hurricane, you can have some backup plans, but there's going to be some last minute hustle that comes up trying to mitigate any issues and create the best experience possible. And so it's all about remembering like I've got this, and it's not just about that no issues come up, it's how you handle them that I believe. It's how can you get into that quick problem solving resourceful brain of yours and start to mitigate any issues, start to come in and troubleshoot. That's ultimately what we want to look for. And setting that expectation for yourself, I think, is also really important. So I tell myself, hey, I'm going to run this workshop. There will probably be a mistake in there. That's okay. It's how I recover, how I handle that mistake, how I keep moving forward and I fix things. So it's not that we have to be perfect and try to create zero mistakes. Of course, you're totally right. We strive for excellence, but we also recognize that we are human. We're dealing with other humans. People do make mistakes, and it's all about how we can work through them and how we can troubleshoot them when they do come up instead of freaking out like, "Oh my goodness, what do I do now? This was not supposed to happen. What's going on?" We can freak out, or at least our brains certainly can. Even if we're cool and composed on the outside, if your brain is freaking out, that's not helpful for you either.
Right. Yeah. So let's go a little deeper into that because you brought up a very good point about change. There's so much change management that happens in our
Mm-hmm.
industry, and there's healthy ways, I believe, in approaching that change and how it comes. And you highlighted it a bit, but I would
Mm-hmm.
love if you would go into detail about how we could manage the change that happens on events and in our lives, especially when it happens um, up so I guess fast, up and down all the
Mm-hmm.
time, constant change.
Yeah. So I think number one, just setting yourself up for the expectation that change is inevitable, right? When we go into it expecting like, this is my plan, but it's probably not going to go, exactly the way that I planned. And that's okay. Being okay with that and recognizing that there are going to be backup plans and you're going to find the best backup plan, or option possible and moving through that. And so that is always going to be, the way that we talk to ourselves, the way that we frame our expectations, that's where the value comes. Because when we have an expectation that's over here and then reality ends up over here, we have what I call the frustration gap. Yes. And the bigger the gap, the bigger the frustration. And the more that we are frustrated, the more we're often flustered. We can get anxious, stressed. We tend to then turn to food or turn to wine. And then we're also not thinking with our cognitive brain. So I tell everybody that there are two parts of our brain. We have our thinking brain in the front, so our prefrontal cortex up here. We have our habit brain in the back. So I teach people that it's like a mullet, right? Business in the front, party in the back. Exactly. That's how our brain works. And so the freak out happens in the habit brain. And what we have to do is try to mitigate and reduce the freak out and remind ourselves, this is normal. I've got this. We put everything from the back. Instead of working from the habit brain, we move everything back to the front, which is where all of our willpower is housed, our cognitive reasoning and thinking, the mental performance. That's ultimately what the part of our brain that we want to be tapping into in order to be solving these problems, in order to work with this change. Mm-hmm. So it's just taking a few deep breaths, realizing that change is inevitable. It's happening. What's the best way to solve this problem, right? Rather than arguing with the situation or arguing with reality about why this shouldn't be happening or so-and-so didn't do their job, we can look at, okay, this is what we have to work with now. Here's the best way that I can move forward. And giving yourself some time and flexibility, and even telling, if you've got maybe a colleague or a client or somebody who is maybe really urgently pressing you for an answer or putting you on the spot, just telling them, hey, give me 2 minutes. Let me think about I've got a couple ideas. Let me think through the best way to handle this. Giving yourself that space and distance just for a few minutes to breathe and to really think through what is the best way, to not necessarily always feel like I have to come up with something right here and now because they want an answer, but really trusting that you can take a step back, breathe, think, and then that answer and that solution will come. But we have to get out of that habit brain and revert back to the thinking brain. Does that make sense?
No, that makes absolute sense. And I kind of see like training your muscle, right? Training that muscle to be able to react in that way. Each and every time you have these scenarios that pop up. And then it goes back to your think, feel, act, right? Take a moment and think, how do you feel about the situation? And then you can act out of a better spot.
So. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about habits there, and we just got done with the book club where we read Atomic Habits by James Clear. So it's an amazing book. I really loved it.
I love that book.
It's such a great book. So let's talk about some healthy habits that event planners can set up that are super easy to be able to help impact their health in a good way.
Yep. So I take an Atomic Habits approach very much. Atomic Habits and the Compound Effect, two of my all-time favorite books and so influential in any area of your life, which I find just amazing. But that's what I teach is 1% improvements, 1% level ups, and let's watch these small, seemingly insignificant changes compound over time because you will be amazed. So what this might look like is maybe instead of drinking 5 cups of coffee all day long and not drinking any water, you start to alternate. So you have your first cup of coffee in the morning, then you drink 8 ounces of water before you have your next cup of coffee. So you can drink as much coffee as you want, but you're going to start drinking water prior to the coffee too, to make sure that you're still hydrating your body. So that's a small, what I would consider a 1% improvement. We're not trying to restrict or deprive or say you can't have this or this is bad. We're just trying to add in something that we've already established a habit for. Similarly, that might look like going to bed 20 minutes early so that you can get a little more sleep. When you are hydrated and you actually sleep 7 to 9 hours at night, you have far less cravings. You're way more energized. You are 30% less hungry and 20% more satisfied with the food that you're eating. So we have much better control over not just what we're eating, but how much, just naturally from the way that our body's regulated when we're hydrated and when we're sleeping. So those are two of like the big, and those are big like fat burners right there. We don't give enough credit to sleep and water, but those are two very easy things to start to do, to really make sure that you can do like, a small simple step, and it's not, going to bed 2 hours early. It's not, I'm not saying, oh, you go to bed at midnight. No, you should go to bed at 8 p.m. Right? That's not realistic. We've got to look at what feels like just a 1% improvement, getting just a little bit better. It might look like eating a bag of baby carrots before, having a different snack or before having lunch. It'll look like asking yourself, well, am I hungry before eating? And when you're eating until you're satisfied and being really mindful of what are all of these excuses and justifications I'm giving myself to overeat, such as it's free, they
Right.
offered it to me, I'll never get this again, or it's a really fancy restaurant or a fancy chef, or I'd be crazy to turn this down. So really just being mindful, starting to watch those thoughts, that's a great 1% improvement.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, because we need our coffee early in the morning. Sometimes we're waking up at the crack of dawn or before,
Right.
right, to manage these events. So you hit on some really big areas that I feel like event planners struggle with: the coffee, getting a lack of sleep when they're on site for programs, and just the thought
Hmm.
process behind it. So thank you. That was really good, really awesome. Um, Before we head out, I wanted to talk about burnout. Um, Burnout affects event planners, and I really feel like it's due to the mindset
Hmm.
behind our responsibilities. So, can you talk about the impact of burnout on then how what it has on your health?
Absolutely. So, burnout often is just another form of adrenal fatigue. And so, we end up just zapping all of our energy. We typically aren't eating well, we're not sleeping, we're maybe drinking too much coffee or alcohol, not enough water. And so, it's just a combination of, uh, you know, again, kind of like the small bad habits that can compound over time to
Compound.
create, yep, a negative end result. And so, really, just, having compassion for yourself and recognizing that this has simply been a lack of self care over a number of weeks. And
Mhm.
just recognizing that, what, I put the job first. I put these other things first instead of looking at how I can put myself at number one as well. And I think this is one of the challenges that a lot of women have is we create this false dichotomy between, food is good or bad. I can either be it can be successful at my job, or I can have a family, or I can please a client, or I can have lunch. We think of it as like it's an either
Either
or
or.
situation. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. And so it's instead of looking at, well, it's either this or it's that, we want to look at, well, how can I do both? How can I show up and serve my client and also serve my needs? Because if you are not drinking anything throughout the day because you don't even have 2 minutes to use the bathroom, like that, you need to look at like your boundaries that you have with clients and setting certain
Absolutely.
expectations, right? Like nobody should be upset because you're drinking water and using the
Exactly.
restroom for 30 seconds, you
Right.
know? And so that often just comes from, so it comes from self-love and really recognizing, hey, this is how I care for myself. And when I care for me, I can show up so much better and so much more fully to care for my clients when I do this. And so it's recognizing what works best for your body. So some people's bodies respond better or worse to different foods, to different stimulus, alcohol or caffeine. And so it's just really understanding what works for your body and recognizing that you can put yourself first. It's not selfish. You're not sacrificing a client or their needs. You're looking at how you can serve them best by making sure that your cup is filled first. So
Yeah.
that's often what I recommend. And just recognizing when burnout happens, that it's okay, and just to see that as that's a time now to take maybe a step backwards and to pause and to give yourself that break. Maybe you're used to working on the weekends, and now this weekend you're going to close the laptop, turn things off, and just say, you know what, this is my weekend to unplug. I'm going to spend it with family, spend it with friends, spend it outdoors, do whatever is going to rejuvenate and fill you up. And then you can get back to things on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much goodness there. And thank you. And I feel like we're going through much burnout now than ever before, especially during the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic.
Yep.
Not only do we have kind of that compound effect of people not having jobs and being on furlough and really being burnt out,
Hmm.
trying to figure out what's the next step for their lives. But also those that are there and working, they're working harder than they've ever had to work before because
Right.
the virtual meetings and not allowing themselves that time, like you said, to practice self-care in between these virtual meetings. Because some people think that because they're virtual, they're either less time and you can do them over and over again, but there is a burnout factor with that as well. So,
Right.
everyone just follow what Jillian said, take care of yourself, make sure you're thinking through what's best for you. So, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. This has been wonderful, and I know we've come to the end of our time. So, I just wanted to ask, do you have any last words to share with our community here?
Yeah. So, give yourself grace and compassion. We are all trying to navigate a new and challenging world with, different differences in work schedules, in things like events and how events are being hosted. Maybe you're learning technology and trying to help host online events. Meanwhile, you've got, spouses and families and kids who are trying to remote or distance learn. And you've got, so much uncertainty in your personal life in addition to your professional. And so just really give yourself that grace and that compassion and start to practice
Mhm.
more positive thinking about yourself in a positive way, right? Not just feel good affirmations, but things that you can actually truly like stand by. Start looking for all of the ways in which you might be nitpicking yourself, criticizing, shaming, guilting, and looking for how you can start to shift out of that and at least shift into neutral. You may not be at a point where you can shift into something really positive, and that's okay. But
Mhm.
first start by getting into neutral, and then you can shift into positive. But take care of yourself first. When you learn how to manage your mind and your thoughts, it makes it so much easier to handle other people, to handle clients, to handle bosses or colleagues, um, to handle family, to handle kids or your spouse, things like that come up as well. And so just give yourself that permission to take care of yourself, to spend time doing things that you enjoy and that you love, and to recognize that you are going to serve others the best when you feel like you are at your best.
Absolutely. Thank you. Give yourself permission, everyone, to take care of yourself. Thanks so much, Jillian. I just appreciate having you on here. I think there's so much goodness out of everything that you spoke. So, really appreciate that. Why don't you share with our listeners where to find you? If people just love what you're putting down, they want to go and find you. Share with them how to best get in contact with you.
Yes. So my website is called bodyyoucrave.com. You can visit me there. I have a free Facebook community called the Body You Crave Community. You can make it really easy on you to remember the name. But come join me in there. And I do lots of free training and videos. And it's a place where you can get a little bit more of a taste for what I do and who I help. You can also find me on Instagram at Jillian Lama 2. That is my handle, and I would love to connect. And if you think, well, hey, I might have a problem, but I don't know about this chick over here, and you're thinking, well, I don't really want to work with Jillian. But if you feel like this is something that speaks to you, then get support. Find a mentor, find a community, find somebody that is going to speak your language and that is going to resonate with you and help motivate you to work through some of these challenges. I'm certainly not the only person out there who does this. I would love to help you, but at the end of the day, you've got to find somebody who's going to work best for you. So I would just really encourage you to find a group, a community, a mentor, somebody to where you can get the support that you need.
Awesome. Amazing. Again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the Planners on Purpose community. So thank you again
Yes,
for
thank
being
you so much.
here. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Wow. 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 Again, thank you so much, Jillian, for being on the Planners on Purpose podcast. I hope all of the listeners here really enjoyed what you had to bring to the table today. I hope that everyone is encouraged and found at least one thing that you could take away from this conversation today. For more information about the podcast, please go and visit plannersonpurpose.com/podcast. And before I forget, we have a book club coming up. So, my book club people, November 18th, we're reading Big Magic. We're going to be discussing it on Facebook Live. So, visit the website to get more information on that too. So, until next time, I encourage you to move forward on purpose.